would say that it makes sense because I mean you have to be inspired from somewhere to have somebody else's work to have been like, oh, a girl travels to a magical land, you know.
Exactly.
And anyway,
And
this hat's not going to stay this way, so I just wanted to be done. I wanted everyone to see my green hat because we're going to Oz, like so I'm like an Emerald Cityer.
I love that. Emerald City fashion.
What?
I said Emerald City fashion.
Yes. This is the Lonely Fans podcast, and we are the Lonely Fans. I'm Ehryn, and that is
Ashley. And today we have a wonderful episode for you, but you won't get much personality out of me because I have all the facts, and I will leave it to Ehryn to provide the color commentary.
She is factual, and I am false. I'm flamboyancy. I bring the pizzazz. And
that's right. You're bringing the sparkle. It's specifically the emerald green sparkle.
Yeah, but why do I look like a cast off from one of Jim Henson's characters right now? Like, I seriously look like I'm like some kind of like. Am I like a Muppet that never was?
Maybe you're one of Henson's creations meant to be in an adaptation.
What I like is that you guys can probably see reflected you in my glasses, like the people that are viewing this right now. Like, seriously?
Yes. You are getting extra of me. I'm sorry. I am not the beauty behind the operations. I'm just the brains.
You are quite beautiful. You are quite beautiful. But that role was already taken by me, so you can only play the part of the brains here.
That's right. That is right. And as we said earlier, I am definitely the straight man here, and you get to be all of the personality.
Well, because the straight man's the one I can't do.
This is true.
It just doesn't work. It never has. I tried. I tried really hard for so long to try to play this straight man. It was so rough. Like, nobody bought it. Nobody.
No, we did not buy it. We knew.
There was no Academy Award to be won for my performance.
No, that's okay. That is okay.
All right, anyway, I'm losing the hat and the glasses because that's gonna bug me. But I wanted to go into theme because we are going into the marvelous land of Oz, the wonderful land of Oz, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. No, we're going into Oz. We're going to find out, where did Oz begin?
I'm sure people to see the wizard.
people that have seen like the movie or are fans, like them. Maybe we're not introducing them to any information they're not already aware of, but they get to hear our version of the story.
Right. And I think that this is one of those stories that, like, I mean, I'm going to steal something from Beauty and the Beast where I go tale as old as time, but it definitely is one of those stories that the more I deep dived into it, the more fascinating it became, because there were just so many facets to it. That I was like, can I go down this rabbit hole? Can I go see if the original music from this has ever been found? No. The 1902 musical, most of the book is gone. I'll never get to sing those songs.
It's rough.
It's a sad thing. I know, right?
Like, you and I are the lonely fans growing up young, like in a weird social circles and family lives, that we decided that we lived in our own personal lands of Oz and stuff, and we're appreciated all the different sci-fi fantasy worlds because it was our favorite places to be. And Oz is like the OG for people like you and I. I mean, I'm queer and you are
definitely straight, but
you're a woman
nerd.
And you're a black woman. And there's a lot that, like, we all have different things where it's like Oz just kind of seemed to be that place that we could try and just get away from the pressures of what our world we live in.
It definitely was, because it seemed like in Oz, like, there was a place for everyone. And I don't want to say everyone knew their place, because that wasn't the case, because the whole story is about overcoming those ideas of knowing your place and going to something better. And one could say that seeing the wizard isn't is a euphemism for that journey itself and not necessarily a destination, even though that's what we've come to understand it as, is this is the ultimate destination. Because what happens when Dorothy finally meets the wizard? He's a disappointing little man behind a curtain.
Yeah. Like it's
That's
so meta.
patriarchy.
It's just so
That's
meta.
patriarchy. That's patriarchy in a nutshell right there. A disappointing
Well,
little man
and that
behind the curtain.
well, and that's one of the really fun things about the Wizard of Oz and everything L. Frank Baum made is that has influenced so much of our own pop culture and culture since
Yeah.
Oz began with an author by the name of L. Frank Baum. And okay, get the L. I always okay. First off, I always hated the fact that it was L. Frank Baum.
We're we're just
Everyone
gonna call
else,
him Frank for the rest of the episode. We'll call him Frank Baum or Baum, like because the
right?
L Frank Baum is a mouthful.
Right, but I want to just talk about the fact that yes, he would go by Frank. Actually, he did. He
Hmm.
his okay. So the L stands for Lyman. Is it maybe? Uh,
I
Um,
think it's Lionel or Linus. I
yeah,
don't remember. I
he
did not
didn't
write
like it.
that down. I,
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't
okay.
write it down.
It's okay. But yeah. So the L was his legal first name, but he went by Frank. Um,
Hmm.
and so he was the one that wrote this books, but he didn't write the book originally. He was telling the stories to his children, right?
Right. So his son, in interviews after his death, had talked about how these characters, like the Ten Men and the Woodsmen and stuff, um, they were all characters in these bedtime stories that his dad would tell his siblings every night. And so there was these little like loose associations to these stories, but it wasn't until like the late 1800s, 1890s when he started to write down some of these stories. And that's because he was heavily inspired by the success of Alice in Wonderland, another escapist fantasy starring a young girl who goes through her own journey of discovery. So eventually, though, at the insistence of his sister Mary, he did publish, and it was a hand printed, hand published edition where he actually did the press himself. And so it was introduced in 1900 to the world as the Wonderful paused, and it was successful in its small little print run. And so in 1902 it was picked up for an actual run with the illustrations being done by his friend W. Dinslow, who also holds a copyright, who held the copyright, it like as a co-copyright person on it. And so in 1902 it got its first print run, and it was 10,000 copies at the time, which was
Okay,
a very large print run for a children's book.
right. That oh god, especially for its time, you know.
Yeah, because a lot of people were like, these are children's stories. Why do we they're not that successful.
Right. They're not supposed to be anyway.
No.
Because yeah, I mean, because you had like Alice in Wonderland. I don't know was if that was a children's story or not, but Wizard of Oz, you'd think it was a children's story, but I don't think
Um,
it really was exactly the.
no.
It.
It
I
really
mean,
wasn't.
when he okay, so he actually, if I recall, you of course are the person that will probably be able to fact check any of this for me, but he wrote, like, of course he wrote the story, but he never intended to do a sequels. He never intended for it
No.
to become like a world like beyond what it was in the first story. But people, like, I mean, this is how it shows where we are now today, and people are like begging like people to come back and do more Marvel movies, right? More.
Hmm.
We want more of this, we want more of that, more Star Wars. Like that's kind of what was doing that. There were fans there that wanted more Oz.
Yeah, in fact, I think it's the cutest little stories ever. But back in the day, you could write directly to the publisher, and the publisher would give you the author's actual address. And so he got these little fan letters from his fans, and these were small children, and they were saying how much of an impact this book had made and asking him to write sequels. And that's eventually what made him write two more sequels to The Wizard of Oz, because these young fans just talked about the impact that it had, and he didn't anticipate that it would have such an impact. In fact, he had hidden political messages in there, but kids don't understand the politics of things. They just like the world.
Right. And that was what I liked is he wanted to put a lot more like of like realistic, the political stuff of Oz. If you're gonna still invent a world, and Elving Baum, he was Frank.
It's hard because you like want to put respect on the man's name, but at the same time, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, can I be Frank? Because I'm not gonna get that right all the time. Oz has been a part of my life forever, but that's because I was born in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, where Judy Garland was born.
Yep.
Still live there. I live there again now. I should say. Didn't still. I was gone for a while, but and I was raised in a family that we watched The Wizard of Oz all the time. I mean, it was a 90. We born in the 80s, raised in the 90s, so I was still in that time frame where Wizard of Oz was still showed once a year on like television.
Right around Thanksgiving.
So
because that was like the best time. We used to watch it.
It was like the
too,
kickoff to it was like the kickoff to holiday movie time.
Because it was like perfect time for ratings.
Yeah, I was always fascinated by Oz. Of course, I also loved another Oz movie that we'll talk about in a future episode. But of course, that's the later on sequel from 1985, Return to Oz. But that one's a whole different tale, which actually follows a lot more to the darker tone that Frank set for his stories.
Yeah, I mean, because again, I think MGM has kind of warped our understanding of what these books are because most people alive today, have not read the book. They've actually just seen the MGM movie, which was made to be bright and beautiful for Technicolor. And it is a bright and beautiful movie. But so much of like the book is exploring all of these things like the seedy underbelly of America, the Munchkins representing like the working class with somebody with their boot on the working class, which would be the Wicked Witch. And then of course we find out that there's somebody who's got their boot on the Wicked Witch and all these other things. And then like the Emerald City being like the shining beacon that we think it is, and it's all an illusion. And of course, even down to Dorothy's shoes being silver, which is a representation of like the Gilded Age, and just having the idea that something like silver could be made to shoes because it's so delicate to be made with, and it's soft. It's a soft metal, but it's also something that like if she could do it, it's considered disposable, and she's just kind of writing her way there, which we know that she does not write her way there easily. She has all these things coming up, so I really think that like MGM has done a beautiful job of selling a dream of Oz. And also, I think that the book was also very reflective of its time because it does address some of these like social themes, but it does so in a way that's very child friendly. And we got to remember that like the children of the early 20th century were very different from like our own children. They had very real concerns about things like wealth, socioeconomics. Most of them were working by the time they were like, 8, 9, and 10. So different world. They could handle different grittier stuff for their children's books, but at the same time it didn't have it where it was like this oppressive thing. It was still an escape, even though it had these things that the children probably would have recognized in their own childlike mind. That's what I love about it.
The Wizard of Oz on Broadway in 1902.
That on its way to being made into a movie, it was also made into a wildly successful musical.
I know, and it's like it was like 100 years. Yes, I'm like, but you can't find the script. You can't find any of the information really.
So you can actually find the book, like the book that Baum wrote about it. He's listed as one of the playwrights. And for those of you who are not versed in like musical theater, so there's the music and lyrics, and then there's the book. The book is basically the thing that people read and act out. The music and lyrics are all the things that they sing. And usually it is two different people. Occasionally it's one person who can do both. And it's very rare that somebody can do them both well. But Baum actually wrote the book for the play, The Wizard of Oz, in 1902. And then, of course, he's not a joke kind of guy. And if you wanted anything to go well on like the vaudevillian stage or like touring productions, you had to throw in jokes. So they hired a joke writer named Glenn McDonough to come in and write all the jokes and polish the script. And it didn't actually start on Broadway. It started on a Midwest tour as a part of a touring company. And then because the tour went so well, it went to Broadway. And in 1903 is when it opened on Broadway.
As most Broadway shows do. Like, it's just weird to think that not much has changed. Like, when you look 100 some years ago, like, you know. Like,
well, I mean, like, most of the time, like, shows now open in, like, Boston first. But,
or Chicago,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, they, like, opened this in Wisconsin because they were not sure it was going to be successful. They were like, we're going to keep it far away from major cities.
Let's take a major chance and let's put it in Wisconsin. Like that way if it's a major flop, none's the wiser.
Right, because people would be like, you know what, it was in Wisconsin, like Wisconsin doesn't count. Like, I'm not saying Wisconsin doesn't count today, but like when we talk about like the cities that were really important in the past, it's like New York, Chicago, Boston, Minneapolis was on that list because of the timber industry. But
I would even think that I would even think Duluth, Minnesota would have been more of an option back then. Even
it was because of the shipping industry. In fact, we have, you know, in Duluth, we had that huge manor that was made by one of the most successful families in America. But
and actually, Judy Garland's family, the Gum family, they lived in Superior, Wisconsin around this time too. So
yeah, so I mean, it was a thing. Like they were just like, we're not sure how well this is going to go, so we're going to open this in a small town in Wisconsin and see how they like it. So it was, even though it was a Broadway show, I like to think it got its roots in vaudeville a little bit because of the way it was debuted. It was more of a vaudevillian production. It was very low budget in the beginning. It was done with a traveling troupe, which was very vaudevillian at the time, and there was no big stars attached to it. And then when it finally went to Broadway, that's when it got its huge stars attached. It got the huge budget, and they were super surprised at how successful the run was when it, especially on opening night, that it ran for 2 years on Broadway, and they were demanding a second one. So he was working on a second musical adaptation of his second book, The Marvelous Land of Oz. But that one was not as well received as the first one because he tried to age up Dorothy a little bit and give her a love interest, and people were like not into that. They wanted the cute little girl from Kansas.
Right. It's like that was about it. It was like they didn't, people when they go to places like Oz, Neverland, like the major point, you don't want to grow up. That's the point. You don't want Dorothy to grow up. There's an innocence to it, and that's what it is. An adult Dorothy going to Oz is going to change Oz.
It is, and she was supposed to bring her love interest, Professor Know-It-All, with her, and it was this whole thing. But it wasn't like it was unsuccessful. It was still an Oz property. It just wasn't as successful as the first play.
Exactly.
And so it did its run, and then that was it. And I don't think we're obsessed with finding the score for that one because I personally don't care. So I went down the first rabbit hole and not the second.
But as we were saying, I think with what happened here, World War I kind of put a pause to these, right?
Yeah. So World War I basically put a pause to everything because, I mean, it was like one of the few times that Broadway actually went dark.
It was like it was like the original pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, because everybody was going to fight these wars. There was not enough energy left for this kind of whimsy, and there wasn't money for that anymore. So it went on pause. And then it wasn't until after World War II that there were even any talks about reviving any of these musicals. But of course, by that time, the original book had been lost and the original music had been lost. And so they were talking about doing with a whole new book and music.
The Silent Films of Oz. silent films.
Yes, I was actually going to bring that up.
I am
So,
I am obsessed with silent films, but I can't watch them because they terrify me. But I'm obsessed with the art form.
I don't think that they're terrifying. I do think the music is like very much like stage makeup because at
It's
this point
terrifying.
they hadn't really perfected the art of like the whole, everything being subtle. So like when you look at early Hollywood films, like everything is these big dramatic gestures.
Big dramatic gesture.
And now it's like very subtle, like our
Well,
actors are very like and our even the
yeah.
makeup's toned down, but
Well, and
the
with
first
silent
films.
with silent films, you had to be animated. You had to overact, right? Like,
You really did. And your
mm,
makeup had to tell a story too,
mhm,
because you didn't have words and you had these little tiny title cards, but they
mhm.
weren't like, these huge, you couldn't put them throughout the whole movie. And you usually had somebody locally, like whoever was your best piano player playing the piano. I
Yes,
love that
just for
idea.
the whole thing.
Like,
Like
yeah, like
you
little
gotta have this,
Edna, who
like
little
essentially,
Edna, who hated playing the piano as a kid, is now getting paid to play the piano because she's the best darn piano player at the church in that
yes,
small town. She's getting
yeah.
her flowers.
So, oh, but that's the whole thing. I love the whole piano, the dramatic. Like somebody has to like compose a whole soundtrack, and then somebody has to write out a story of what the actors have to act, but no one gets to
Hmm.
speak.
Yeah,
Um,
and I often wonder if like they sent out the sheet music to like all the theaters that were going to play the silent films. So like were all the pianists playing the same thing or were like some people getting more whimsical music and then others were getting more dramatic music. The one, oh no,
ooh.
Dorothy's in peril music. I wonder.
That is
Like I
that's a
wonder.
fantastic. We should definitely talk about more silent films in the future. I really like the idea. We should definitely find ways to get some silent film discussion going because I want to learn more. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so and those were ones like I think they had like I know they introduced some characters that people weren't as familiar with like from the movie or books and like if they didn't read all the books like the Patchwork Girl. Um,
Yep.
I used to
Have you
call her.
actually
I
seen the
used
silent films?
no, but I know they're available somewhere in the archives.
Yeah, I seen one briefly where it was like one of those late night things where I was on Turner Classic Movies and they were doing every Sunday they used to do a silent film marathon. And I had caught like that one right after I'd finished watching Cinderella to bed. So I only saw the part where Dorothy arrives in Oz. So I didn't get to see all of it. But the Munchkins were actually pretty scary in that version because
I
they didn't
will.
look like how you would they were some of them were children and some of them were like little people so it was like a mixture of people but it just looked really wrong because of all the makeup. It looked like clown makeup, to be honest. It was just it was bad.
Yeah, I think during some of my deep dive of all this, I kind of ran across because obviously I knew the silent films happened because obviously the 1939 film was not the original film of any sort. There was like the first time it was ever acted or any time. It was just the first time it ever became mainstream. The Road to Hollywood.
Yeah,
Um,
and it was really the result of like somebody at MG like, well, I'm gonna be honest, it was Sam Goldwyn. Sam Goldwyn had seen the stage musical and was like, we could turn this into a huge movie, but he wanted to hold on the rights and
what?
have Eddie Cantor
What
star.
they want to take a successful Broadway show and turn it into a movie? What? What? That's
Well, the
never
thing
happened in the
was,
history of Broadway. What are you talking about? They don't do
well,
that.
in the 30s, like the 30s for Hollywood is literally like the year of film adaptations because
Yeah.
almost every script in the 1930s for that whole decade was coming out of a play that had been on Broadway. They literally went around just purchasing every play's scripts rights that they could get.
Yeah.
And then, so some of like our most memorable ones, like the Follies of 1939 or 36, all of that was all stage musicals that they used as starring vehicles for their studio stars. And so Sam Goldwyn, no different, after he had saw Disney's success with Snow White,
Yep.
was like, hey, I guess there is a market for children's movies. So I'm going to purchase these rights and I'm going to make Eddie Cantor, who was in the studio system, he was a contract player at the studio.
Mhm.
He wanted to make him the Tin Man and have him be like in a very prominent role and kind of almost sideline Dorothy. Because the idea was, well, we could get any kid to play Dorothy.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But Eddie Cantor can play the Tin Man and we can kind of center more around him. I'm
Right.
sorry, Scarecrow. He wanted to be him to be the Scarecrow and kind of
I
center more
was
around
about
him.
to I was about to fact check you on your own facts
should.
because I'm reading your
Yes.
facts here, and I was about to be like,
Yes.
she's incorrect, but you know what? She did the research.
No, I am incorrect. It was the Scarecrow. It was not the Tin Man. The idea of the Tin Man being a star comes much, much later. But yeah, so then MGM was like, no, we're gonna buy the rights from you. We don't really want Eddie Cantor to be like the starring guy in there. So they bought the script. Well, they didn't buy the script. They bought the rights for the script.
Okay,
and
but wait, MGM wasn't Sam Goldwyn obviously the Goldwyn of MGM?
he was, but the thing was that he held those rights privately.
Oh, he
had
bought them
purchased
for himself. He
privately.
didn't use them
Yeah.
as MGM. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he
Mhm.
was like, I'm going to use this as leverage.
Got it. Okay. They would have been able to use by the studio, but with his creative control.
Yeah.
Got
Because
it,
he was
got it.
like one of the big executive producers there.
Right,
And he was like,
right.
if I hold on to these rights. But the thing was, is that they weren't going to give him any money for it
Yeah.
because they were like, no, if this is going to be a kid's film, then Dorothy needs to be front and center.
Yeah.
And so they were like, we're not going to fund this the way it is. So eventually he was forced to sell the rights to
Yeah.
MGM as a whole, the studio as a whole. So now the studio can do what they want with it, which led to them hiring 3 different people to write the
I was
script.
going to say they had to do a bunch of different revisions. I mean, that's what's happening in Marvel. Like when you hear these stories about what happened back then, nothing's changed in the film industry. It's just really all about the business. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
whole show business, Hollywood business. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes. Anyway, so you were talking
But
like
there's
the revisions.
drama. There's drama with the script. Like there is drama with the script from the beginning.
Right.
Because nobody knows what the heck they want to write. So the first person who starts writing a plausible script, because there's lots of little treatments going on. In fact, somebody's assistant writes a 17-page treatment, and they're like, ugh, we hate them all. So then William Cannon is one of the contract screenwriters for the studio, and he writes a version, but he basically plagiarizes the 1925 silent film. They were like almost exactly alike. So MGM's like, no, we're not doing this. So then they finally hire Herman Mankiewicz, Noel Langley, and Ogden Nash to each write their own versions of the script. But here's the kicker. Neither man knows that the other ones are like, none of them knew that the other ones were involved. They thought they were the sole screenwriters.
Ooh, a scandal.
Yes, los escándalos.
Ooh.
It was just shady as fuck. It was just shady. Oh my God. So the final script that was approved for the next step, it wasn't greenlit. Approved for the next step was like in a weird Frankenstein amalgamation of all 3 of their scripts. And of course, nobody was happy. I'm sorry. That always makes me like, I have this image of like this like Franken script walking around.
That's what I'm like. That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, this is like terrifying. I'm like, we had the same image. I'm like it's like a weird like hybrid like weird thing that got like mushed together by getting sent through like its atoms got dissolved and then re-merged and re-put together. The fly.
And like the thing is like at this time, these screenwriters weren't getting paid for the script. They were on salary. So it didn't matter if they wrote a really good script or not. But what mattered was the better, like the more credits you had under your name, the better salary you could get at the studio. So you'd be like the go-to. And then you had more choices of the types of films that you wanted to write for. And then you were more likely to get it greenlit. So I think it was super, super shady, especially like hiring like Ogden Nash, because he was a poet. He wasn't even a screenwriter. So I mean, it's not to say he didn't do a good job. We don't actually know what any of their original scripts look like, because the one that is available is a weird Franken script. So
the one that was filmed.
Wow, that's
okay. So sorry, that was good. I'm jumping ahead of the game here. I'm jumping ahead.
Oh my God. So they have a script that they're plausibly excited for, right? But then the
Right.
producers get it. The actual film producers get it. And they look at this and they're like, this is too much like a kid's movie. Like, we have to make this more sophisticated. So they hire more people to do revisions. And I think I read somewhere like there were like 17 or 18 different revisions of the scripts and rewrites of the script because they didn't really want this fantasy Oz. They wanted to turn it more into like a prolonged dream sequence because they felt like audiences would not plausibly believe that Dorothy could go to this like fantasy world and actually be in this fantasy world. So that's why, like, you know, when Judy Garland wakes up and she's like, oh, it was all a dream, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there.
But it wasn't a dream. It was a place. And you, and you, and you, and you were there.
Yeah, that was their way of trying to explain away like this fact that there was like all of this like Technicolor beauty there. So one of the people that they actually hired to do revisions was the legendary George Cukor, who's like a noted man in Hollywood. Some of the greatest films of Hollywood have his name attached to it. So they finally, after all of those revisions, in October 8th, 1938, like got a version that they were happy with. And so now they were like, okay, we're going to greenlight the script. But the problem is in those days, you didn't greenlight with stars attached. You greenlight the script and the production budget and the producers first. And then you have to go out and find your stars. And so they finally had a script, but they didn't have a star.
I'm so very excited for our next episode when we get to start talking about the movie and Judy Garland, because that is where my knowledge comes in too. Like I'm sure Ashley will have some lovely knowledge along the way, but I am from Judyville. Like seriously, I am.
It's so funny because like the production, like you would think that once they got through all the drama of the script, like the production would just be a thing and they would just do it like any other movie. But there's a reason why there's so much lore behind the production issues, because there were so many production issues.
The future of Oz. First episode, just to kind of talk about the history of where L. Frank, he
Mr. Baum.
Where he started. He invented Oz. He created Oz. He is the god of Oz.
Yes. Yes, him. But we can't, because we wouldn't have those beautiful illustrations without him. And he also owned half the copyright.
I'm only saying that, but Frank is the one that actually created the story, the characters.
It is.
Whereas
Yes,
and the illustrations, I believe, were so important to when I like to look at and see. They're so important and like connected to the story because they help set up the imagery.
And they actually inspired some of the NGM production choices later on. Mm-hmm. But I always like, I didn't even know Dinslow was part of this. I didn't even know his name. And I just wanted to like give him a little shout out because he helped make this book a success as well, because children's books need they need illustrations.
It's so true. But and that's that. Oh, I'm so excited. Like, so yeah, we have gone through like a few decades now from when Frank created and originated the stories, becoming the book, which then brought in the illustrations. So then they're together, creating this new world and this saga and this franchise.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be possible if. So the MGM version is still under copyright.
Yes.
Frank L. Baum's under the old laws. Before it was the author's, in perpetuity, or author's life plus 90 years or whatever. So the original fell out in 1956. So there have been so many like rewrites and reiterations of all of this. That's why we have these huge franchises and we have these other properties, because the original story's copyright is in the public domain and has been since 1956. And so basically, if you want to use those characters, the original characters, not the MGM characters, but the original ones, you can do so.
Right. You can take any of the original content. You just can't you can't put the ruby slippers. because Ruby Slippers.
That's right. You can use the silver shoes. Use
Yes.
the silver shoes.
Use this, and we'll talk about those. I'm so excited because when we talk about the movie, we have to talk about why they chose to make the iconic in the book silver shoes to ruby slippers, and that's gonna be so excited to talk
Was it
about.
because of Technicolor?
It
Please
might
tell me
have
it was
been
because of
spoilers.
Technicolor.
Spoilers. Oh, this timeline, like, so there's so much that like led up to the Wizard of Oz movie that really kind of everything poured into, and that's what like set the next level of Oz's future.
Yeah, and I think that like it's important for the listeners who might be like, "Oh, why did you stop here at the end of the script trauma?" Dude,
We've got a long way to go.
I use the California dude for this. Like basically in California, if we say dude, it means like non-gender. Like it is not a gendered term for us in
Oh,
California.
kind of like
But I'm
girl.
like,
Girl.
yeah, I wanted to say girl, but I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll use dude.
Girl.
But girl.
Girl.
There is so much drama. Like, if we had not stopped here, we would literally be recording for like 6 hours just trying to get through the movie.
Right.
Like the first movie.
And there's a lot of neurodivergence between us, so we gotta stay on task here a little.
We really do, and we actually have to task manage each other. It's a complimentary thing. Like we basically have to task manage each other. If we didn't have bullet points for Ehryn to like get us through, we would be here forever.
It's so true, because I'm an improver, and so unless I have prompts, I'm just gonna be like, let's just talk about Oz. Yeah.
And I'll just go down the rabbit hole with you and see how far it goes.
Yeah, we'll see. And then no one will listen because they'll be like, what the hell are they talking about? Or they'll listen to us just to go to sleep. Because we're boring. But,
that would be okay too.
but it's, I mean, okay, so yeah, all that drama of just the beginning, and now we're going to go into, like, so in our next episode, we will be going right into MGM 1939 film and going on from there, because there's still a long time of Oz to keep going until we get to the Wicked years, where this is all going to culminate into, because in November 22nd is the release date of Wicked Part One.
I have it circled on my calendar, and I've already told my husbando that it's date night.
My friends and I have already, like, we're watching and waiting for tickets to be on sale so we can buy them, because we're going to go to Duluth from where I live here. We're going to go to, you know, where we used to like watch the movies.
Yeah.
We'd go to the ultra screen, and we'd go there because they have the restaurant in full bar now. So,
oh my gosh, remember when we saw Nashville there? Oh my God.
No, we saw Memphis.
Sorry. That's right.
Oh my God, that was
amazing. That's still one of my favorites. That's still
a funny story of how that night went.
We'll have to talk about it some other time when we get into our musical theater geekery.
Yeah. Anyway, but we should wrap this episode up because I think I'm excited, like, so much. So for now, I think we just got to click our heels and head right back to the.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
Yep. Except when there's anything else.
Yeah, that's true. All right, we should click our heels and close the curtain on this act of our Wizard of Oz saga. But the next time we shall open with the casting of the legendary Judy Garland.